Let's go back to our town hall format here. We've got Ann from Auburn. Question about job creation. Go ahead.
Yes. What steps would you propose to deal with the need for more jobs in many areas of the country?
Boy, that is the key questions. You've made it very simple and clear. How do you get jobs? Because everybody wants them and everybody campaigns. I don't think you're going to have a candidate come in and say, you know, I'm not concerned about the jobs and I'm going to produce the jobs. Well, I think I approach it more analytical and almost like a physician. You have to know why we don't have jobs. We have to know why we have bubbles and why we have collapses. And that's why you can't ignore the monetary system, because the Federal Reserve creates the bubble. It's artificial wealth, and it's doomed to collapse. So if you don't understand that, you can't solve it. If you don't understand that, the politicians who don't understand it in Washington, they keep doing the same thing. If printing money and spending money, running up deficits and borrowing money and printing money was the cause, how can you get out of that problem by doing the same thing? So you can't get jobs. So I want people to understand the business cycle so that you can do the proper things. But the most important thing is getting back to the concept of capital. Capital investments create jobs. But right now we have given up, even though we call ourselves a capitalist country, we don't have true capitalism, because capitalism comes from savings, not out of a printing press. But there is capital out there. It's just not being utilized because of the conditions. We chase capital out of the country. Weak currency countries send capital out. So we buy stuff because our money is cheap. So our best export is money. So we send all our money to China. That's where our capital is. They have $3 trillion in the bank. And we owe $3 trillion to the various countries around the world. That has to change. But one thing, you'd have to change some tax ideas. There's trillions of dollars, well, at least $1 trillion and more, of money held overseas by our corporations. They made the money overseas. They've been taxed. Most countries don't tax you when you bring your money home. Well, I say, why are we going to tax people just for bringing their money home? Why don't they bring the money home and we wouldn't have to print money and pretend the government can spend the money? We have to encourage them to invest in it. But you have to do more than that to get them confident enough. You have to liquidate debt and get rid of all the mistakes and get all the houses that were overbuilt, which the bubble caused it. You have to do that. But you have to have a change in the tax code. You have to encourage your capital to come back. You have to discourage the Federal Reserve from just printing more money. But then you have to deregulate. You just can't keep adding on regulation. One thing that I am proposing is that if I am to be the president, I'm not going to add to the Federal Register. I want to be the first president ever to shrink the Federal Register, because if you're in business, I don't know how in the world you can keep up with the tax code and the Federal Register. That is a real handicap, and that's why nobody's investing.
Now we're going to go back to Roy from Manchester. Go ahead.
You do. You have said that you would pull back the military forces. How would you decide which ones, or would they be all of them?
Well, how would I decide on which troops to come home? And basically, I want them all to come home, but you can't get them all home in the next week. So you do have to have priorities. I would think that the least controversial, you come first. The troops went in to Korea when I was in high school, and they're still there. We don't need troops in South Korea. I mean, they're 10 times, if not 50 times richer than North Korea, and that's a fourth world nation, and here we are subsidizing the South Koreans. So bring them home. Japan, why do we subsidize Japan? Why do we take care of them? Bring them home. Why do we provide this defense for Germany, and they then have more money to take care of their entitlements, and we have less money to take care of our sick people and our elderly? So bring them home. But I'd bring them home. I'd immediately back off from the Middle East. I would say, you know, we are not in a declared war. Why fight these wars? Bin Laden is dead. And the Al-Qaeda, even our CIA says, basically not in Afghanistan anymore. The most recent report from the CIA says that there is no evidence that the Iranians are building a nuclear bomb. So we don't need all this. So I would bring there's no place that I think should be exempt. I think we should just come home, and we should never allow the president, and I would never go to war without the permission of the Congress. The president has an obligation to defend this nation in emergency conditions if you're being attacked. It's been very clear throughout our history. But to engage in war, like in Libya now, and saying, our president now says, oh, I got permission from the United Nations. We shouldn't be doing any of that. We should be quitting that, and we could save hundreds of billions of dollars by doing that.
Eventually, from what you're saying, you would have all of our forces back in the United States.
I think eventually we should. Because
right.
then we would defend this country.
But what would you do about the Taliban coming back into?
Well, that would diminish the threat of the Taliban.
How?
The Taliban is almost 100% motivated by one thing, and that is us being in their country, killing their civilians, bombing their countries, and that is what they get so upset about. Just think of it this way. What if any country, let's say China gets stronger and we get weaker, and China does to us what we do to these other countries? We don't have any right to be over there. And every day, just this week, we killed many, many civilians in Pakistan and in Yemen and in Libya. You know, we're killing civilians. That makes people very, very angry. And the Taliban is not the Al-Qaeda. The Taliban are people who want to get foreigners out of their country, just like you and I would if any foreigner came here and did anything like what we do to these other countries. And we have to accept that responsibility, because that's really the way it is. And if we think they just popped up and say, oh, let's get together and let's go destroy America. No, read everything that bin Laden ever wrote and what they wrote, and they're very, very precise. Bin Laden said he wanted three things to happen after 9/11. He says, we want to entice the Americans to come over here and get bogged down like we did to the Soviets. We want to bankrupt their country, and we want to cause dissent in America over their foreign policy. So guess who's laughing in his grave right now because we've done everything he wanted. And what has happened to this? Iraq now is an ally of the Iranians. We've turned it over to the Shiites that used to belong to the Sunnis. So we have pushed them to the Iranians. The Iranians and Pakistan now are being pushed to the Chinese because of this policy of we got to kill every Taliban person in the whole world. You can't do it, and that is the motivation. The motivation is occupation and us being on their land when we have no right to be.
We're going to stick with the military. We got Jim from Manchester. Go ahead.
What cuts would you make in the military budget? You've been answering this one.
Pardon me?
What cuts have you been making in the military budget?
What cuts have we, this country, been making? What would I make?
Yes. Well,
oh, I would, all the things I've been talking about, the cost of keeping troops in Korea, yeah, Japan, Germany, and the Middle East. You could cut hundreds of billions of dollars. But I don't call that defense. I call that militarism. I would call that what Eisenhower called supporting the military-industrial complex. And they're making big profits and all. So no, I would cut a lot of that militarism, but I think our country would be stronger. We would defend ourselves. Maybe we'd defend our borders instead of the borders between Pakistan and Afghanistan. I mean, they're impossible, and I've been on that border, and you cannot defend that border.
Great. Did you have a follow-up?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. Lucy now is from Goffstown. Another question on healthcare.
Thank you very much for being here today, sir. What are the best, most practical ways to begin overturning Obamacare?
The best and most practical way, the best way is to have a Congress pass a law to overthrow it and a president to sign the law. We don't have the votes in the Congress. We have the votes in the House, but not in the Senate. And I don't think our president is going to vote to overthrow Obamacare. So it's a political problem. You have to change the nature of the Congress and change the president in order to do that. But in the meantime, there are court fights going on and saying, you know, he's gone too far. He's telling you, you must buy insurance. It's a mandate. And there's been some success in the courts. That would be a good way to do it. I think the other way is for the states, your state governments, to stand up for the rights of the people and say enough is enough. We're not going to do it, because traditionally in our early history there was such a thing that Jefferson and others talked about, and that's nullification. There's a limit to what you can jam down the throats of the states and nullify these laws, and I'd be in favor of that. But there's more than just Obamacare. Obamacare. I mean, how many other programs do the mandates come down that we're forced to be involved in? I mean, I have one suggestion to deal with the whole thing. And this is not my promotion of a flat tax of 10%, but I get so tired of the federal government being a big burden on the states and the individuals. But let's say that you would be willing to take care of yourself, completely and totally, from cradle to grave. You don't need the government to take care of you, and you want to opt out, not of Obamacare, but you want to opt out of the whole system. Would you be willing to pay 10% of your income just to opt out and expect nothing from the government? Most people I present that to say, hey, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Then you mean I get to keep the rest, but I have to take care of myself? Yes, you can't go to the government and have the government take care of you. And that's what a free society would be all about. You get to work. It's said to be your money. It's not the government that allows you to keep a certain percentage, and then you get to keep it and be responsible. So I'd like to opt out of Obamacare, but I'd like to have you have the opportunity to opt out of the whole system.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to Eileen from Manchester. I'm going to kind of question your ability to do all you just said.
Is the decision-making ability and power of the presidency as great as it was in the past? Or are corporate interests in control of the economy, international relations, and other areas?
The corporate interests they're really in charge. It's the military-industrial complex. It's the corporations they bailed out. It's the big banking system. They are in charge. But one thing is a lot of people give free markets a bum rap and say, see, that's what capitalism does. They control it. But that's not capitalism. That's not free markets. That's corporatism. That's an abuse of power, and it's sort of, we have that in medical care. We're not having socialized medicine. We have insurance companies are making money, and drug companies make money, and management companies make money, and medical companies, they make money. So the corporations do make money on this, and they are in charge, but it's the system. It isn't the free market that says that the corporations are in charge, because they shouldn't get any benefits. The marketplace takes care of the consumer. It doesn't serve the interests of big business. It doesn't serve the interests of big unions and big labor. It serves the interests of the people, because all of us are consumers, and that should be what it's designed for.
Thank you. Now you have a question on education. David from Nashua.
Yes, Dr. Paul, thank you for serving.
Yeah.
As president, what are your plans in dealing with the Department of Education and working with Congress? How would you reform or repeal the National Education Act, No Child Left Behind, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and the new Common Core standards?
Well, the proper constitutional position on that, and the one I endorse, is I'd get rid of it all. I mean, I wouldn't have a Department of Education. Where does it say in the Constitution that the federal government is supposed to take care of your schools? All they do is take control of your schools and take control of your kids. And so, no, I think it should all be abolished. And, you know, when people say, well, what else are you going to cut beside the military and all that spending? Cut the Department of Education. Has the quality of education gone up with No Child Left Behind? No. I have quite a few members of my family is in education, and believe me, they are sick and tired of it, you know, of all the controls that are put on there, and if a teacher varies something, the teachers are teaching the test, and all I hear are just negatives. No, there's no authority. If we, the people, want the federal government to run our education, now that we've had this test, you should amend the Constitution. Otherwise, they do anything they want. You know, if you can take over all of his education and all the medical care of the country without changing the Constitution, there's nothing left of the Constitution. And that's why presidents go to war without even asking us. I mean, this is a crisis that's going on. It's a crisis of the rule of law that we're having. So on education, believe me, we would not suffer and we'd save some money.
But here's the thing,